Okay, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I am a Webmaster Trends Analyst here at Google in Switzerland. Who is like the people here in the Hangout or like the people watching this video, perhaps. We have a bunch of questions that were submitted already. But if any of you new people to the Hangout have any questions, I'd love to help answer your questions first, and then we can get through some of the rest and open it up again.
I have a question, John, if you don't mind.
All right.
I'm having a persistent problem with Google Local. I've got a business that has, it's a doctor. He's got his clinic name, which is the same as his kind of last name. It's included in the business name. And there's a personal listing that comes up for him that's associated with his business, and we've stripped it out. I've called Google about 8 or 9 times about the problem, and they're saying that the search algorithm is serving up the local listing, and the proper business listing with the reviews doesn't get any attention. Like it's got reviews, it's got a virtual tour, it's got the logo, but we're not able to get that to come up for the business name search. Is there anything that can be done to fix that?
I don't really know about Google Plus Local or Google Local business results because that's not really a part of the normal web search results. It's essentially something that comes from the map side, comes from the local team. So
yeah, they told me the exact opposite. They said that they can't do anything there because that's a search algorithm and they don't influence Google search and they can't move it up the chain at all. So I'm kind of stuck. Okay. I don't know. I've been going back and forth. I don't know who else to call.
Okay, so what I do there is maybe start a forum thread where you post the URL that you're seeing and post a search query, maybe a screenshot so that someone else can take a look at that and see what actually is happening there. And if you can send me the URL of the forum thread, then I can double check and see who that could be routed to. I can't promise that we can kind of clean that up because some of these things do take a bit of time to get reprocessed, and if it's really from web search itself, so it's not like a local business result, then that's something that might be ranking for other reasons, but maybe that's something I can help you with.
That would be great. Would you mind if I ask just one more quick question?
Sure, go for it.
It's something about sort of black hat web spam. So what we're seeing is everything from sort of social media links, which then follow through and link to Google with a search, to underground forums that are asking micro workers to do searches for specific doctors and businesses in the area. And we're seeing them rank very well for those searches that we're finding. So I was just wondering what can be done on a white hat level to combat those kinds of like user-generated tactics.
That probably wouldn't be having any effect on search. So that's something where maybe they're just doing things that essentially don't really have any big impact on search anyway, and that's kind of keeping them busy doing something, and they're ranking regardless. But that sounds like something I'd love to kind of take a look at and look at with the team here. So if you can send me the details, maybe through Google Plus directly, then I can pass that on to your team here to kind of check out.
Oh,
I mean, it sounds like it's essentially doing something that they think maybe helps their rankings, but probably doesn't do anything. But I'd like to double check.
Okay, absolutely. I'll send the info over. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, John. Good evening.
Hi.
I have a question about content. We have 2 websites. One with a theme we call website A about right-hand drive car rental, for example, in Spain. And we have another website with very thin content, but aged several years ago, about car rental in Spain, plain that. I would like to mix both and improve the content, having truly good content in them, but with the same URLs or that kind of things. But my doubt is if we are not going to be right-hand drive car rental, we're going to be plain car rental in Spain, and this old theme is going to pollute my theme for Google. It's a good idea to mix them, or I should forget the right-hand drive car rental in Spain website? What do you recommend?
I usually recommend combining things into a really strong website instead of kind of spreading things out and kind of diluting your content. So if there's a way that you can focus on one really strong website, that's a great thing. If you really need to split them because it's a very different market, for example, maybe you're targeting consumers on one website and businesses on another one, then that maybe makes sense to split. But in your case, it sounds like it's a website that kind of targets the same audience. So that's something I'd consider combining into one strong website. Obviously, there'll be some fluctuations as things settle down, as we understand what's happening there. But I think in the midterm, that will probably lead to a stronger single website than you have with the separate websites.
For sure. My question was most about the theme of the one of them, a right-hand drive. We're not going to have that. And I don't know if Google is going to recognize our new theme that's only car rental in Spain. That was most my question.
I think that's something that just takes a bit of time for everything to kind of settle down. So obviously, in the beginning, when you set up the redirect and you redirect the right-hand drive website to the other site, and maybe set up new pages on that website, then that's something you'll see fluctuations. Maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a little bit longer, but that'll settle down. It's not the case that we see, oh, well, this is a right-hand drive content, and it doesn't match at all the normal car content. We kind of see this as something it's related. It's essentially creating one stronger website, so that should be no problem.
And the last one, sorry for another one.
No problem.
Thank you. If we improve the content so much that it's totally different about the same topic, but totally different that the content it's now at this time, I think it's a good idea. It isn't.
I think if you're targeting the same audience, the same kind of content, that's perfectly fine. I mean, websites update their content from time to time, and it looks completely different. Maybe you do a redesign, all of that. It's normal. I don't see any problem with that.
Great. Thank you very much, John.
Sure.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, or join
Sure.
in? Is it going to, Fernando? Is it going to be a .com domain, or is it going to be a country-level domain, or what are you doing with the new one? Because I assume people searching for a right-hand drive in Spain won't be in Spain. So I'm wondering if that will affect how the content is delivered. Because if they're searching from outside, then I just wanted to check what your country-level domain is going to be, or if it's going to be a .com.
Yeah, I guess theoretically you could do either one. I don't know what you guys are going to set up on that.
Because if you have two, and presumably people outside the country are searching for right-hand drive, then it might make sense to still keep them separate if you can target the two websites differently. That would just be my thoughts on it, rather than combining, because we had the discussion 2 or 3 weeks ago about, you can set it in Webmaster Tools where you're targeting, but a country level domain will specifically usually target people inside that country. So if he's setting it up on a .es or whatever the Spanish is, you might suddenly lose all of those, not lose them, but that might be one of the influences on losing those people searching for right-hand drive.
Yeah, I think in a case like this, it's also kind of tricky to watch out for geo-targeting in general, because if you're providing rental cars in Spain, you're probably targeting an audience that's outside of Spain. So you wouldn't use like an ES domain for something like this, because it's essentially, with the ES domain, you're saying, well, I'm targeting users specifically in Spain, and if you're targeting people who are coming to Spain to find a rental car, then that would probably be more of a global audience than the country-specific one.
Okay.
Hi, John.
Hi.
You know the Google quality algorithms, are they applied site-wide, or is there any possibilities and then the page level.
Can
So
you
let's
repeat
say
that?
let's say the Panda update. So the Panda applies on the site byte or in the page level.
We try to be as granular as possible. So if we can, we'll try to aim for something on a page level. But a lot of these broader quality algorithms, they're more on a site level or subdomain level, where we can say, well, in general, this site is like this, and where it's really hard to say, well, this individual page is like this, or this page is a little bit different. So on that level, it's probably more on a site or broader level than just the individual pages.
Okay, cheers.
All right. There's a question in the chat from Michael. We think we have an update rollout. Is that right? Can you say anything about it? Does it start with Panda? I see the SEO weather tools in Germany are so high. I don't know anything specific that's happening. I don't think that's any kind of a Panda update at the moment. I think that's still waiting for you guys. So if you're seeing changes in search results, a lot of these are just normal changes that we make all the time, and some sites see them more, sometimes see them less. So that's something where specifically with those changes that you mentioned there, I saw some reports in French, I saw some reports in German, but I saw a lot of people saying, well, I don't see anything. So it might be just something small that's changing there. All right, let's run through the questions that were submitted, and then we'll open things up for broader Q&A again. What will be the right way to test this domain.com with a hashtag home? So basically with, what's it called, an anchor symbol there in robots text. So the tricky part here is we don't support using these kind of fragments in the robots text file. We essentially only support the path or the query string parameters, and anytime you use that pound sign, that hashtag sign in the robots text, we assume that you have comments following that. So we kind of ignore that. So if you need to block crawling of specific path like that, which essentially we don't crawl like that directly anyway, then that's not possible in the robots text. So for any URL where you have this fragment at the end of it, we have to crawl the main URL anyway, and then we have to render the JavaScript to kind of see what shows up for that fragmented URL, but we can't like only block crawling of that fragment URL, because we still have to crawl the main URL as well. So if you're using fragments as a part of your URLs, then that's something that probably won't be usable with the robots text. So you'd have to block the main URLs there if you wanted to do that. Another alternative is to use HTML5 history API so that you have normal URLs that you can use. You can still use JavaScript-based navigation for that, or to use the hashbang setup that we support, where you have the escaped fragment URLs that you can rewrite things as. So for both of those cases, you can block URLs from being crawled in robots text normally, but if you're only using a fragment, that's not something where you can kind of block crawling of that specific fragment URL. You can only block crawling of the main crawled URL, and you could put a no index on it when we render it, but essentially you can't block crawling of that. We have continuously error 500s, and Google reports them with a timestamp, but only for the day. I need the format hour, minute, second. Is that somehow possible? I can't find the right log file otherwise. So I believe in Webmaster Tools we do only show the date there, so it's not something I can really help with there. If you post in the help forum, I can try to look that up and see if I can post something for you with a more exact timestamp, but otherwise in Webmaster Tools it's directly just the date.
That was me. I posted that question.
All right, great.
And what would I need to do to find out the hour, minute, and second?
If you can post something in the help forum and send me the link, then I can double check to see if there's something specific I can just send you there.
Okay.
Other ideas you could do is perhaps look at the sitemap, how we're picking that up. Sometimes you see this error broader on a website. If it's just really sporadic, then it's really hard to kind of have a systematic way of picking that up through Webmaster Tools. In Google Search Console, oh yeah, I should be saying Search Console instead of Webmaster Tool all the time. Sorry. We have the new analytics, but it only shows 999 keywords. I need to create monthly reports on the amount of keywords we rank for. So my question is, how long will the old report remain available? We do plan on switching that off at some point. I don't know what the specific date is. I imagine a couple of months, something around that time frame. We're going to show that one missing keyword so that you have 1,000 at least fairly soon. But to get the count of the actual keywords, that's not something that we support in the UI at the moment. So I don't know if that will be added later on, or maybe it makes sense to sign up for the API and try it out to see if you can get that data with the API data.
Thanks.
After a company merger in the niche, is it better to keep the consumer sites separate even though they sell the same services? Should site A 301 to site B, or is it okay to move both sites to the same IP range and continue updating both? If you think that it's worthwhile keeping them separate, that's obviously something that you can do with just two sites. That's not something I'd feel really strongly about either way. Sometimes it's just a lot easier to have one site to maintain and to update, and generally that makes that site a little bit stronger in search as well. So that's often worthwhile to just combine these sites and make one stronger site rather than having two sites that are kind of similar but not really equally strong. So that's something where I generally recommend combining them. If you have more than just a handful of sites and you're wondering what to do, I definitely recommend combining them into kind of a smaller number of sites. But with just two sites, sometimes it makes sense to keep them separate. Sometimes it makes sense to combine them. Our websites are both losing traffic because some of our best articles are getting video-rich snippets. Can Google take a look at the issue? Essentially, what you'd need to do there is post in our help forum, and you're welcome to send me a link to your forum thread, and then I can take a look at that to see if there's anything specific that you can do on your side or that we need to do on our side, because sometimes we pick things up in a way that look like maybe videos when we crawl the page, but they're actually not videos. But I'm happy to take a look at that, and sometimes there are things that you can just do on your side to prevent that from even being considered. Hi, John. Did Google roll out a Panda or Penguin update? Yeah, we talked about this briefly. So essentially, from my point of view, at the moment, we don't have anything specific that we are able to share with you guys. But I assume as soon as we do have the Panda rollout, which should be happening, I guess, in the near future, maybe next couple of weeks, then we'll have something for you. Do you know if webmasters will soon be able to have any input on which site links Google is showing the search results? You do have some input, but essentially that's just the demotion of the site links. So if there's some that you really don't like, then you can tell us about that in Webmaster Tools or in Search Console even, and we'll try to take that into account when we do the search results. The thing to keep in mind there is that the site links depend on the query, and for some queries it makes sense to show them, for others maybe not. So just because you're demoting something doesn't mean it doesn't show up at all as a site query, as a site link. With regards to providing site links, at the moment, that's not something that we do. Is the breadcrumb markup and schema markup a ranking factor for desktop or mobile, and does Google recommend using this? We definitely recommend using this kind of structured data markup because it gives us more information about your pages and how they should be shown in search. Especially the breadcrumb markup is something that we can show right away, kind of in place of the URL. But it's not a ranking factor. It's not the case that if you use this kind of special markup, your page will suddenly be more relevant for these queries. The user essentially doesn't really see that markup on those pages, so they don't really notice what you're actually doing there. But it does help us to better understand the pages, and if the URL looks nicer because of the breadcrumb markup, maybe that does send you a tiny bit more traffic. But it's not the case that we'd use as a ranking factor. About a nofollow, when a link has nofollow algorithm, let me see, sees that as do not follow or I don't trust this link. So essentially, the nofollow just tells us not to pass PageRank through this link. So that could be the case that maybe it's a paid link, maybe it's an advertisement that you have on your website, and advertisements are fine. It's not something that we'd say you shouldn't do, but shouldn't pass any PageRank because of that. Or maybe it's something that's user-generated content and you can't really vouch for all those links because you don't check them all manually, then using a nofollow is a great use for that. So it doesn't pass any PageRank. It's not the case that we don't follow that link, so it might still happen that we actually look at that link. Maybe there are other links passing, also linking to that URL. It's not like a block like a robot's text. Let's see, the second part here, if we buy an advertising banner to another website, should the link be with nofollow or not? Like I mentioned before, if you have advertisements on your website and you're linking to other websites because of those advertisements, then putting a nofollow there is kind of what you should be doing. How do you suggest tracking the new Google Weblight views? A transcoded version of a web page always pushes the same server log. How do you split them out? Are they all users or a mix of bots and users? Oh, hi, Andy.
Hey, John. Always easy ones.
Yeah. So I think we're supporting analytics now or really soon, so you'll be able to kind of track the normal views directly in analytics. If you're not using analytics, then that's a little bit trickier because we do kind of combine these requests, and if we have a lot of requests for the same URL, we'll probably just send your server one request for that URL, so you don't really see it in the server logs.
These are popping up, and they're not readable in the server logs, and they're not in analytics yet.
Okay, so do you have any other kind of analytics service on those sites, or?
I've tried Mixpanel. Nothing's really pulling them out. It's all just one big lump. I mean, we can see what URLs they're going to, but they're not standard URLs that the crawler is going to either. Because you guys are escaping some things, and we have no idea what they're actually viewing, if it's a person or a bot.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at it from, I think with the Weblight user agent, then that's something that's essentially in proxy for a user that was trying to access that URL. So it's at least one person trying it. It might be 2 or 3. It might be a lot more that we're kind of proxying this content to. So we speed things up by not requesting it all the time from your server. If you need us to kind of request it all the time, you can do, I think, the no cache header. I think that's documented there. That basically turns this feature on. I don't know what the status is for like third-party analytics providers or how you could compile that information otherwise. What you can do is kind of send us feedback through that email address that I think is in the help pages, okay. And that goes directly to the team. So if there's something specific like an analytics provider that you're using where you need to have this data, or maybe you're saying, well, it would help to have this information in the HTTP requests, kind of like what happens with RSS feeds, then I don't know, that's the kind of request you could send there, and we can take a look at that.
Awesome, thanks.
Sure. Does Google take into consideration the size of a company or site when processing responses for manual actions? Both Rap Genius and Thumbtack penalties were processed very fast. However, similar sites sit for weeks or months. We don't really take into account like what kind of sites they are, who they're owned by. A lot of these cases, it's not the case that even the website team kind of has this kind of background information on what kind of site it is, how big it is, who owns the site, or who has invested in the site. I mean, that's something that was also suggested here. So that's not something that we take into account for the manual action processing. And sometimes there are situations where when the website team looks at it, they're like, well, this is a fantastic job. They really did a complete cleanup of the issues here. Maybe they even wrote some magic tools to kind of fix these issues on a broader scale. And those are the situations where the website team will say, well, this is a fantastic cleanup job. We need to revoke the manual action because it's not relevant anymore. And some of these sites, when I look into them, because I mean, people complain about them, so I try to double check what's actually happening there. They really do a fantastic job of cleaning these things up. So that's not always the case that I'd say, well, this is like a well-known site, therefore it gets processed faster. But it's really the case of what you submit with the reconsideration requests. And a lot of the reconsideration requests, when I look at them, they're really low quality. They're almost like, hey, Google, I fixed my issue, but they don't give us any information about what they actually did. And those are the kind of reconsideration requests that tend to go back and forth a couple of times, or that where the web spam team says, well, let's look at it in a week or so to see what actually changed because we don't have any information about what actually happened here. So that's the kind of thing where it just takes a lot longer to be reprocessed. But if you can send us a reconsideration request that's really to the point, where you tell us exactly what you've been doing, you give us information showing that you've completely cleaned up this issue, then that's something that really helps us to kind of process these things faster. We don't have to pass them on to other teams to kind of discuss. We don't have to wait to see how things are processed with regards to web search. We can really kind of look at that, say, well, this is clean, this is really well done, and we can take that into account and take that as a sign that we need to kind of remove this manual action. So that's something where I think if you have great people submitting the reconsideration requests who really do a fantastic job of cleaning these things up, sometimes you can get these processed a little bit faster. And of course, sometimes we do have a backlog that kind of applies across the board for all websites, where maybe the manual actions team has a lot to do on their plate at the moment, and it kind of has to process them a little bit slower. If you're seeing things that are really taking a lot longer than maybe a week or two, then that's something you can also bring up to us, and we can double check with the team to see what's happening here. Is this like getting stuck unnaturally because maybe it fell between the cracks or something like that, or is there something that we can do to kind of help speed things up here? JSON LD can be implemented dynamically. Is there some limits to that system? Are all pages interpreted? Is there some kind of implementation that can conduct Google to not parse correctly the JSON LD data? You can implement JSON LD with JavaScript, obviously, to kind of have that generated on the page dynamically. The tricky part there is, of course, we have to render these pages with JavaScript to see that kind of special markup, the JSON LD data essentially there. So that's something where if we pick up a page really quickly and we see the HTML content right away, then that helps us to process it a little bit faster than if we had to actually render the page in our browser and do that then. The other issues that we often see when it comes to rendering pages to kind of pull out the metadata from the pages is that a lot of times the JavaScript or the server responses will be blocked by robots text. And in a case like that, we obviously can't like crawl the JavaScript and pick up what it's actually doing because it's blocked by the robots text. So you'll see that in Webmaster Tools. In the, what is it called, blocked resources feature in Webmaster Tools. So that's kind of an aggregated way where you'll see that. You can test individual pages in Webmaster Tools using the fetch and render feature there to kind of see how they render. You don't see the JavaScript that's kind of behind those pages. So if you have JSON LD markup on there, you don't see if that's actually generated. But you do see if the JavaScript is processed to generate the rest of the content on the page.
Hey John, do you know about the issue regarding site links search box JSON LD code that appeared about a week ago. I don't know if you know about it. Basically, in the example that's in the document on your pages, basically the query input is in the short form, and that was generating an error for the past week. So we now have to put it in long form, so the rich snippets testing tool actually gets it correctly. Is that something that you know about, or have you maybe fixed meanwhile?
Yes, we passed that on, I think, a couple days ago to the team. Let me just, gosh, what's it called? Site link search box.
Yeah.
Let me just double check. So that, yeah, we filed a bug about that. So I assume that'll be fixed in the next couple of days, maybe a week or so, something like that. I think that's just the structured data testing tool that's picking that up incorrectly.
Oh, okay, but there's no problem using the long form alternative.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
The markup is fine. While doing deep linking for my app, around 3,000 URI unsupported errors appeared. I found your comment as a note that this kind of status can take quite some time to get flushed out completely. Is my app going to be indexed if I ignore these errors or not? So the URI unsupported error for app indexing essentially means that you supplied an app URL within your pages or your sitemap to kind of link to that app page, but that app URL doesn't actually work. So for those specific cases that are like that are listed as errors in Search Console, we won't index them until we were able to kind of reconfirm that this link is actually correct, so that the link you have from your web page to the app and the link from the app back to your web page is essentially matching and the content matches. Then we can take that into account for app indexing. So if you fix that problem in the meantime, then this is something that'll just update over time. So as we recheck those pages, that'll be updated automatically. It's not something that you need to kind of manually clean up or kind of flush out or reset or anything like that. So that'll be picked up automatically over time as we recrawl those pages. Obviously, crawling the app pages is a little bit slower than web pages, so it's not quite as fast as if you just swap out a meta tag on a web page and everything works again. So that takes a bit of time. Depending on the size of your website, the size of your app, how many pages you have there, the rest of your app should be indexed normally. So it's really just those pages specifically where we picked up this error are the ones that we wouldn't show for app indexing. And in a case like this, we'd still show the web page anyway in the search results. It's not that your content would disappear from search. It's just that we wouldn't swap it out against the app URL. We're finding social media links. I think you mentioned this before. So again, if you have some more information on that, feel free to send that to me. How do I get my site to appear in search results? Our blog, events page, FAQ, etc. all appear, but the homepage doesn't. It doesn't have adult content on it. I've tried submitting it here. I need to know the URL there. So that's something where I'd recommend posting in the help forum so that other people can take a look at that and escalate it to us if there's something really weird that Google needs to take a look at there. Sometimes what we've seen, I really don't know what kind of site you have, but sometimes what we've seen is that sites say they don't have any adult content and it shouldn't be filtered by safe search, but when you look at the website, it's still very racy, kind of adultish content where we'd say, well, from a manual point of view, we wouldn't treat this in any way special. We'd let our adult content classifier run over that, and if it feels like this is kind of not something that we'd want to show in safe search filtered results, then that'll be kind of filtered out automatically. So if it's kind of like borderline content and the home page is okay, but the lower level pages are really adultish, then that's something where we might just say, well, we can't pick it up like that. On the other hand, if it's a completely normal website and it's just being filtered by safe search for some completely unknown reason, then that's something we definitely want to take a look at and see what actually is happening there. So to kind of figure out Is this something we need to manually take a look at? Is this something we need to work with the algorithm teams to have the safe search algorithm kind of handle these cases better? But we'd find out more if you have a forum thread where we can take a look, or where others can kind of help you out on the details too. How do I cope with thin content or little or no added value penalty? We have a website set up where we have 2 identical websites on 2 domains, only because one country has blocked the original domain, but they allowed our new domain. Country target the second domain. So in general, from a web search or web spam point of view, if you have 2 domains and they have the same content, we wouldn't flag that as thin content, as something worth demoting in search. So just because you have a copy of the same content on a second domain wouldn't be a reason for us to say this has no value, because sometimes there are technical reasons for you to kind of duplicate things across multiple websites. Sometimes there are geo-targeting reasons, so maybe you have the same content on your UK page as you have on your US page or on the Australian page, and that's perfectly fine. That's not something where we'd say just because it's duplicated, it's kind of a thin content, little value. But if you do have this flagged as a manual action, then that means the content itself is actually kind of problematic. It's not the problematic that you have it duplicated in 2 places, but it's just the content itself. So maybe you're taking, for example, I don't know, an Amazon feed, and you're just republishing that content on your site, then that's something where we'd say, well, there's really no use in indexing this content separately or in ranking it separately, because all of this content is actually on others' websites already. There's nothing additional, nothing of additional value that you're providing there. So those are the kind of situations where you kind of need to look at the content and say, well, is this really high-quality content that people should find in search like this, or is it essentially the same as lots of other websites that are already out there? So in a case like this where you have 2 domains and you have a manual action like that, I wouldn't assume that it's just a technical issue of having 2 domains. It's really probably something more focused on your actual content that you're publishing there. What should work better for local ranking? 4 different websites per location of my business, or one site with a page per city? Right now we have 4 domains. I think when you go past like a handful of websites and you're targeting essentially different cities, that quickly goes into kind of the doorway page scenario where you essentially have the same content and you're just tweaking the city name. So that's something where you kind of want to watch out for what you're actually doing there. If you have, on the other hand, 4 really distinct business entities and you have a very different audience, maybe this is one really special hotel in one city, one really special hotel in a completely different city, and it's not that they're overlapping in any way, then maybe it makes sense to keep separate websites or to keep it on one website in separate pages. From my point of view, I wouldn't have any strong preference there. From a personal point of view, I prefer to keep them on one website just because it's a lot easier to maintain something that's on one website than to have like 4 separate websites that all are kind of the same thing. But I kind of watch out that you don't head into the direction of saying, well, my business is valid for all of England, therefore I'll create a separate page for every city that's out there, because that's definitely doorway scenario where you're essentially just swapping out keywords on a page to try to make it rank for individual words, and that's something that would go against our webmaster guidelines. With 4 websites, 4 different locations, I think that's generally fine. Does an e-commerce product have to contain 300-word description in order for Google to find it interesting for the users? No. You can provide as good a description as you want. We don't really count the words on these pages and say, well, this is 299-word description, therefore it's low-quality content. You really have to make sure that the content you provide is kind of high quality regardless of the word count. And sometimes that means you have a short description. Sometimes it means you have a really long description. It's not something where we look at the word count and say this is good or How do I get HTTPS to rank over HTTP? I have a number of different links specified in my search console, but I can't seem to set a preference. In general, in a case like this, you set up redirects from the HTTP version to HTTPS. Maybe you even set up HSTS to really make sure that people only access your HTTPS version, and that'll get picked up from search automatically. You don't need to set any preference in Search Console. Can a site lose nearly all of its SEO visibility overnight just by setting up a new website? The only difference being that it's now the non-www version, and before it was a www. Or would Google not act that fast because we have seen a competitor drop like that? That sounds unrelated. So one thing to keep in mind here is if you have your own website and you move from www to non-www, in Search Console, the data will be per subdomain. So if you just look at the www version and you redirect to the non-www version, then it'll look like kind of everything dropped for the www version because that's no longer the one that's actually shown in search. So that can happen fairly quickly. But if you verify both of those versions in Search Console, then essentially you'll have that full set of data and you won't see that drop. But just by moving from one domain to another shouldn't be a reason to kind of drop out of the search results like that. Okay, this is, I think, the local business topic we talked about briefly. Let me just close that up. Let's see. In relation to the core quality update, aka Phantom, is this fed data in real time from the crawl, or does it require a manual push refresh? I don't know how we can say this, but essentially most of our algorithms do try to pick things up in real time. When we can crawl and index these pages, we'll process them and take those signals into account right away. But of course, bigger algorithm updates, if you make bigger changes on the algorithms that kind of process this data in real time, then of course you'll see that bigger change happen when we actually push that algorithm update. So it's essentially the algorithm works more or less in real time as it processes the data, but to change the way that we do process the data, we do kind of have to push that algorithm update. So in a sense, you could say it's kind of a combination of both of them. Rendering and crawling. What Googlebot sees when it crawls a page, how is this crawling different than the cache text version? Is it only visible content that we see in the text in the cache, or the source code of the page, including JavaScript, CSS, etc.? The cached version, I think, is based on the HTML page that we pick up. So it's not based on the rendered version. It's essentially just the HTML file that we picked up through crawling. So if you have, for example, a JavaScript-based website, what you'll often see is that the cached version is actually kind of this JavaScript framework that's just the HTML that was found while crawling the page and not the actual content. How long does it take for Google to index an e-commerce blog post page after publishing it? Does fetch as Google or data highlighter make it easier to index? If you use fetch as Google and submit to indexing, we do try to pick it up as quickly as possible. It doesn't really matter what kind of content it is. Usually we'll try to pick it up within a day or so. But if you publish new content on your website and you let us know about that through a sitemap file or a feed or something like that, then we'll try to pick it up just as quickly. So it's not the case that you need to use fetch as Google to submit things to indexing. The data highlighter doesn't submit anything to indexing. It's essentially just marking up pages that are already indexed. What's the best disavow tool you would suggest, John? I don't know. I use a text editor and Python, but I know there are some really good tools out there that make it a lot easier to kind of process this data, to pull in all of this data, to kind of contact the sites as well. So I don't know which ones I would recommend there. I haven't used them at all. So I'm sure there's some really neat tools out there. Why are not mobile-friendly sites still ranking on top with a special talk to note to Talk? So the mobile-friendly update does give mobile-friendly pages a slight boost in the mobile search results. So if someone is searching on a smartphone, we'll try to kind of boost the mobile-friendly pages that we find in search slightly. That doesn't mean that everything else disappears from the search results. That doesn't mean that something that's irrelevant but mobile-friendly always ranks #1. If we find something that's really relevant and it's not mobile-friendly, then maybe it'll still rank #1. So that's something to kind of keep in mind there. It's not that it turns everything into a filter and everything that's not mobile-friendly disappears completely. I think that the Talk is some kind of an Android app or general smartphone app that works well for forum sites. And if you've set up your website to work together with an app and you use the app indexing setup, then that does help us to understand that these pages are actually mobile-friendly for people who do have that app installed. And we can show a link to the app in the search results as well if you have that app installed. Follow-up question, a site has changed the URL to non-www but forgot the 301 redirect from www to non-www. Therefore, they lost a lot of their link equity. Therefore, does it make sense that they would drop that much because of that? No, not really. So we kind of try to make our algorithms so robust that even if the webmaster does something wrong, we'll still try to figure it out. So if you have the same content on www and non-www and you don't have a redirect set up, then it's not the case that we would say, well, this is a really bad webmaster, we'll demote him in search or remove him from search completely. We'll try to figure out which of these versions you probably want to have indexed like that and just use that. And if you set up a redirect, you can obviously tell us directly, well, I want this version indexed, and we'll be able to follow that. But if you don't give us that information, we'll still kind of try to make an educated guess there. But it's not the case that we would drop the site from the search results. We have many categories on our website. Some are crossed with cities. The problem is that for some of those categories plus cities, there are no results at all. What should we do with the empty listing? Canonical them to the main category, or maybe no index them. This is something that is essentially an empty search results page. So that's something I put a no index on, maybe even server 404 if it's really a page where you're saying, well, there's absolutely no content for this URL or for this query. So definitely a no index, maybe even a 404 to kind of really make sure that those pages drop out of the search results. Because what essentially happens here is we run across these pages, we see something that says no content for this query, and we think, well, maybe this is just an error page, and we drop it on our side. Or in the worst case, we index it like that, and we show it to the user in the search results, and they're maybe looking for this category of thing plus this city name, they land on your page, and essentially they don't find any content at all. And that's really disappointing for users. And in turn, that's the kind of feedback we get back from them, where we'd say, well, maybe we need to take action on this somehow. Maybe we need to figure this out better. But this is really something where if you know that you're not providing any content for these URLs, then by all means, let us know about that. OK, we have 10 minutes left. Maybe I'll just open it up for you guys.
I'll go ahead. It's a client-specific question, John. As one of the clients I've talked to you about in the past, the one that has a penalty issue regarding links. So I didn't really expect to get that removed until the Penguin update, but lately, even though we had a lot of marketing efforts done and keep improving the website, we seem to have lost site links. So at least the extended ones, we only show the small site. By the way, here's the URL. The small site links, and we dropped in the results as well. Even the bad results that we were at page 3, page 4, we've been dropping those. So I'm trying to figure out if there may be some other issue that I'm not seeing there, because we've been doing a lot of good stuff. I think we're getting picked up by local newspapers and doing some really cool stuff, I guess. for the audience, and it just goes in the other direction every time we seem to do something well.
It's
And losing
hard to say.
is a bit weird, because I know when losing site links, it's kind of a danger signal or something like that.
It shouldn't be like a danger signal, but we do try to show site links for like the top search results, where we see like for this query, we can tell this site's supposed to rank there. So usually if you search for something like the name of the site, then that's more likely the case where we show site links. But I don't think that we'd suppress site links if there's any kind of a danger signal on our side. So we don't show site links for all sites. We don't show them for all queries. But I don't think it's a case that we kind of have, I don't know, it's like a secret spam classifier that only removes site links. So
Well,
yeah,
this is for
I wouldn't take
brand names, so it's not a general query. It's for the brand name. We went from like 8 to 10 site links to just the small ones, and the results dropped in the same day. So I don't know. I was thinking maybe something that is happening. I noticed that when I'm looking at the cached version of a page, I'm getting a weird JavaScript error, and but I'm not getting that on the live versions. So I'm not sure if there might be a problem with that, or.
So the cached version of the page doesn't show the normal content anymore?
It shows the normal content, but with a pop-up with an error, a JavaScript error.
Oh, okay. So I would double check with fetch and render in Webmaster Tools to make sure that you're not generating this kind of error when we actually render the page. Because if we see like a pop-up with JavaScript error, then it might be that we see, well, maybe this is an error page and we need to kind of drop it or not show it as visibly in the search results. I imagine you've double-checked that, but especially if you're seeing that in the cache page, I just really make sure that you're not accidentally maybe sending something special to Googlebot where when you check it in the browser, it looks okay, but when Googlebot tries to crawl and render the page, there's actually some kind of a JavaScript error or maybe even a pop-up that comes up that blocks the main content or that looks like a server-side error or something like that.
Oh, okay. But is there anything that maybe you can tell me that something lately has might affect in a negative way in the past week or so?
I don't have anything specific that I can share at the moment, so yeah.
Okay, worth a try.
All right.
Hey, John. I've got a question slightly further down in the Q&A. So we've just started doing app deep linking, and we've added our Android apps to Search Console. And basically, as soon as we did that, we just started seeing all of our deep links showing up as content mismatch. And when you do fetch to Google, we get an internal error, an internal Google error. We're a video site, and we are restricted geo to Germany, Switzerland, Austria. So I'm wondering if there's a correlation there that Google is trying to fetch that content from outside of GSA, and that might be making it blow up. And I'm wondering how we get around that, given that we have licensing restrictions.
Yeah, so I guess one of the tricky aspects there is for apps, the fetch as Google is really kind of limited at the moment in the sense that we can't crawl an arbitrary number of app pages because it's kind of complicated to get that set up and take those screenshots. So that's something where if you're seeing a lot of those errors, that's not necessarily a sign that there's something bad on your side. It's maybe just a sign that we're kind of overloaded there.
Yeah, I mean, all the links work.
Yeah.
Every single one, because they're generated and we know that they'll work. It's definitely an issue with something else. And this like internal Google error and fetches Google makes me think that, as well as the geo restrictions, it's probably that's causing the problems. And I don't know how to get beyond that, because it seems like currently nothing is going to get into the index.
Yeah. So with content mismatch for apps, it's kind of tricky. So I guess for those of you that don't follow the app indexing stuff, what we require when we do the app deep linking is that the content on the web page be equivalent to the content on the app page. So if you open the app page on your phone, you should see the same content essentially right away. And there's some tricky aspects there in the sense that some apps have a really nice UI that works really well on an app that doesn't tend to work that well on a web page. And in a case like that, we might have significantly different content on the web page than we'd have visible on the app, and that might trigger a content mismatch error. That's something where if it's really equivalent content, if it's something where you'd say, well, this should be picked up properly, the algorithms are just a little bit too basic at the moment, then that's something you can definitely send us some examples on, and we can double check it, see what we can do there. Another really common issue that we see there is that there's some kind of an interstitial, like a login page or maybe even like a terms of service page that you first have to click through, and those are also the kind of things we'd say, well, we open this app page, but actually all we see is a terms of service page, an interstitial or something, and that would also be trigger like a content mismatch error.
Yeah, we're definitely not doing that. I mean, we're a music video site, so you get the links are only from single video pages, from the play pages. So you get the same video, obviously, but you just get the video rather than getting all the surrounding Chrome. So yeah,
okay.
What's the best way to send you details?
One thing you can do is post in the help forum. We have a special category for app indexing in the Webmaster help forum, and we generally pick that up. Andy posts there sometimes too. So that's a good place to kind of go. I think since you mentioned videos, that's probably one of the tricky aspects there, in the sense that there's not a lot of textual content, and maybe we can't match the text directly because the primary content is a video or an image. So those are probably tricky situations that the team probably has to take a look at here. But maybe we can get that set up for you. So if you have some sample URLs, that would be great for the forum.
Great. Thanks, John.
Can I follow up on apps while we're on topic?
All right.
It's very similar. So if we have an app that generally requires being logged in to use, can we use the same model of the first click free to make sure that all app indexing works, or would you suggest going about it in some other way? I believe most of my content mismatches are coming because of that. We're trying to figure out a model to let Googlebot in.
Yeah, first click free works. If you can set that up, that's a great model to use for that. That way, like if someone clicks further in the app, they have to log in or complete some form or whatever that is. But on the first view, we can still see the primary content, and that's essentially what we're looking for.
And if we have like a help overlay traditionally to let them understand the app when they first enter it for the first time?
Sometimes, I guess this is something you kind of have to check with the fetch and render to see what actually is picked up on our side. But sometimes that works. Sometimes we can't like look through that and actually see the final content.
Okay.
John, do you have time to check our site again quickly?
I need to head off afterwards. So, I mean, if you can send it to me directly, I can double check to see if there's something I can say, or obviously post in the forum. But
I don't think posting in the forum will help.
All right. Okay. So with that, let's take a break here. I set up, I think, the next hangout on Friday, which should be normal times, and I'll set up the next batch after that. So thank you all for joining. Thanks for all the questions, and hope to see some of you again in the future.
Bye, John.
Bye, everyone.